Hello, everybody. Welcome to Vietnam 360 here on the Library Channel. My name is George Larrimore. I'll be your host today. Thank you for joining us. Our guest today is David Hardman, who comes to us from Yellville, Arkansas. A veteran of Vietnam, did 2 tours. David, thank you so much for being here.
It was my honor.
If you don't mind, tell us just off the top, and then I'll get into more of your story, but what did you do in Vietnam, and what years were you there?
Well, I flew helicopter gunships, Hueys and Cobras, in support of ground troops and also in missions to search out the territory, make sure that our infantry was safe and be able to get by. I served in 1968, January through January of 68 to 69. I was a flight instructor at Fort Rucker, Alabama for the intervening years, and I returned to Vietnam in 1971, January through October of 71.
And you were in the Army for how long?
4 years, 10 months.
Okay. All right, if you don't mind, and this might be a hard question to answer, when was the first time you heard the word Vietnam or were aware that Vietnam was anything?
You know, it's hard to imagine because my recollection in my teens, let's see, Vietnam started in 65, and 65, I was in college for a short period of time, and it was in the news everywhere you looked. Every evening show was all about Vietnam and the combat that was going on there. So 65 through 66, and I joined the Army in January of 66.
And you, I believe you told me you were playing chess or something, or whittling away your time playing chess at school, and you kind of lost interest in it. I believe that's the way you expressed it.
That's correct. I was in college, and I was carrying a pretty heavy load, physics, biology, chemistry, and I just lost interest. I found school to be easy. Always have had. I've always been an A student. And I was sitting in the student union one day, playing bridge and chess, and the dean wanted to talk to me. So I went to the dean and he said, "Dave, you've quit showing up for classes, you know, you're gonna end up getting drafted." And I looked at him and I said, "No, sir, I don't believe I will." And he said, "Well, what do you mean?" And I said, "Well, I intend to join the Army and fly helicopters for them."
Now, how did you know about helicopters? How did you fixate on that?
Well, that's a great story. I was at a P.T. Barnum show, the traveling circus that I don't even know if it still exists, but P.T. Barnum show back in 1964, I believe it was in Belglade, Florida, where I was located at that time. And my girlfriend and her mother had taken me to the show, and I was standing there watching helicopter take off and land. They were giving rides, and I was just enthralled by it. And her mother asked me, and she said, "Would you like to go up for a ride?" And I said, yeah, I would. And they took me up for a ride, and from that instant, I was hooked.
Wow.
I had to fly helicopters no matter what it took. I was going to learn how to fly.
Now, was your father in the military, your uncles in the military? Did you have that kind of a family background?
No, I did not. My parents, neither one of my parents served, and as far as I can remember, I don't believe any in my family ever served in the past.
Did you have any concerns about going to Vietnam? Or what were you thinking when you thought about, well, I'm signing up for this, this is where I'm going to end up going?
Wow, what a question that is. I had a lot of concerns, but I was excited about the fact that I was going to be in control of one of the most sophisticated aircraft that you could fly, as far as being able to handle all the controls at that period of time. And I was excited about it. There was some fear and trepidation. You know, you saw it on the news every day that, you know, people getting shot, getting killed. But in all honesty, I didn't think anything would happen to me. I really felt that confident that the sun would shine on me and I'd get through it.
Now you went in the Army as an enlisted man. Enlisted men don't fly helicopters. How was the transition made that you got to sit behind the yoke?
Well, when I went down to Coral Gables, Florida, where I was sworn into the Army, I took a battery of tests. The tests that I took measured my skill in eye-hand coordination and a lot of other factors, and they said that I qualified to enter the Warrant Officer Rotary Wing Aviation course. They called it WARWAC, and I qualified for it, and I started flying helicopters in Fort Walters, Texas. The TH-55 was the first helicopter I flew, and then advanced helicopter was at Fort Rucker, Alabama, where I flew the Huey and all the different models of Hueys, and that's where it got started.
So your girlfriend and her mother introduced you to going up in them. What was it like the first time you took the controls of one?
It was a nightmare. The flight instructor took it up to a 15-foot hover, and he demonstrated what each one of the controls did. The collective up and down, throttle rotating, cyclic, foot pedals, and he said, now, you take the foot pedals. So I put my feet on the foot pedals, pushed it, pulled it, and saw the helicopter rotate. Then he said, okay, I've got the foot pedals, now you take the cyclic. And I took the cyclic, moved the cyclic around, and he said, okay, I have the cyclic, now you take the collective. I took the collective. And he says, okay, now you have them all. And for a split second, I was solid as a rock at a hover. Then all of a sudden, the wind, I was over controlling that thing, and I was all over the sky like this, sweating like you could not believe. I didn't believe that I would ever be able to fly that thing. But in 9.5 hours, I soloed, and that's where it all started.
So he must have seen some confidence in you, I guess, to turn you loose on it.
Oh, I tell you, when all of the flight school students, we got back to the bus to go back to Fort Rucker, or Fort Walters rather, we all sat silent. Nobody said a word. And then all of a sudden, one of the pilots said, I'll never be able to fly that thing. And everybody just broke out, laughing, crying, all kinds of words coming out. And that's where it all started. And 9.5 hours later, I could fly that thing, and I soloed, and it went on from there.
How long did you train before you went to Vietnam?
Well, I don't know what the current requirements are now, but in flight school when I went through, before you got your wings and became a warrant officer, you had to have 200 hours of dual solo flight and cross country, and a certain amount of under the hood, where you're flying with blinders on and only going by instruments. So it was 200 hours.
Okay. Now, when you got to Vietnam, you had the training in flight school, and then you have the people tell you, well, forget what you've learned, this is what you need to know. What did those pilots tell you that you were about to get into?
I was told to shut my mouth, keep quiet, and don't touch the controls, and watch what I do. And I'll let you know when you can fly. And that's what we did.
So you had, tell us about the cabin. There's the pilot and the co-pilot, I see.
Right.
And who else is in the helicopter?
We have a crew chief and a door gunner. Mm-hmm. The aircraft commander in my unit sat in the left-hand seat. Co-pilot sat in the right-hand seat. Door gunner sat against the firewall in the back in a Huey. At that point in time, we were flying UH-1Bs, and sat on the firewall back right. The
crew chief.
Crew chief, yes. The crew chief sat in the back left, and they were both armed with M60 machine guns. They free held them, free firing, and we usually carried 2.75-inch folding fin aerial rockets and miniguns.
Now, where did you go, if you don't mind telling us where physically you were in Vietnam when you got there?
My first tour, I was at LZ, called Landing Zone Evans, LZ Evans. It was about 40 clicks south of the demilitarized zone. I was with B Troop, 1st and the 9th of the 1st Cavalry Division.
And that was January of 68, is that correct?
That's correct.
I have that right? So that's about 6 weeks before the Tet Offensive, or not even that long.
Not
a
even
month
that long.
before the Tet Offensive.
Tet Offensive started on January 31st of 1968 at midnight in our area. All heck broke loose when the enemy started firing. I'd been in country 2 weeks at that point in time. 45 days later, I was made aircraft commander because we had lost so many pilots.
Now, to our audience who may not remember, or maybe the first time you joining us on the show, the Tet Offensive happened in 1968. It was a holiday, and the Vietnamese ignored the holiday and attacked cities and installations all over the country. It was the major offensive the major offensive that the North Vietnamese and the Viet Cong conducted during the time that we served in Vietnam. So it was hell to pay, as you said.
That's correct. And it was amazing how well timed that whole attack took place. Fire bases, U.S. fire bases, and South Vietnamese Army fire bases, ARVNs, were attacked almost to the minute, all up and down the coast.
Now, where did that, in terms, I know you'd only been there a couple of weeks, but from what your life and work had been like for those 2 weeks, then the Tet Offensive happened. How did it change? What did you start to do when the Tet Offensive hit?
Well, my unit was what we called a search and destroy unit. We flew a light observation helicopter, flew low and slow, and the gunship flew behind the LOH, we called it, and gave it gun cover. And its job was to locate the enemy or signs of the enemy. When the Tet Offensive started, our total operation changed, and we became direct gun support for the troops on the ground.
Mm-hmm. And these were Army units that were on the ground at the time?
That's correct.
Okay.
1st to the 4th, we supported them as they were moving towards the ancient capital of Vietnam called Hue, H-U-E.
Now, the part of Vietnam that David is talking about is the northernmost part of South Vietnam, what was called I Corps.
That's correct.
At the time. And the demilitarized zone is the space between what was North Vietnam and what was South Vietnam at the time. The most, at that time, certainly, correct me if you think I'm wrong, the most highly contested part of the country at that time in those days.
I can't speak for the other 3 corps. There's I Corps, 2 Corps, 3 Corps, and 4 Corps. 4 Corps was in the Saigon area, and I just could not say what they went through. I know that we went through bloody battles.
You had Can Tien, you had Khe Sanh, you had the Battle of Hue, everything around Da Nang.
Ashau Valley.
Ashau Valley, a lot of contact, a lot of activity.
The French were last in Ashau Valley 25 years before we got there. And the Cav made an assault into Ashau Valley, and we found out that the enemy was extremely well fortified. They had tunnels throughout the valley floor. We'd put in B-52 strikes, and in the morning we'd come back to do a bomb damage assessment, and the enemy would have bulldozed around the craters so that they can continue to operate during the night.
Now, how close were you to the border? Was that Laos or Cambodia? That's Cambodia there. No, it's Laos.
Laos.
It's Laos there. How close were you to the border operating?
I'll be honest with you, I've forgotten how many clicks. I know that we had Dong Ha to our northeast slightly, and we were 40 clicks south of the DMZ. How close to Laos? We were close, but all these years I've simply forgotten.
What did you, not talking about the Tet Offensive now, but what did you do on a normal day? Or was there such a thing as a normal day?
Yes, we had
troops off. Did you run medevacs?
No, B Troop 1st and the 9th, we were strictly a search and recon search and destroy unit. And what we do is we just comb the countryside. We'd have 2 major operations. We'd have what we call First Light, And first light flight was when you took off in the morning and you started flying circles around the outside of the perimeter of the base, and the circles like a corkscrew, getting larger and larger, and we're simply looking for any contact that the enemy might have been trying to make, digging trenches into our tree line, our border, our fence line, as you call it, and trying to determine, where the enemy is. That was our daily operation: search and destroy.
And catching people planting mines in the roads, that kind of thing.
Exactly.
So, yeah. What were the people like, if you could remember some of the people that you flew with, that you worked with? What do you remember about them, and who do you remember?
Oh, that's a tough one. To be honest with you, I didn't get very close to most people because either shot, wounded, killed, moved off, rotated back to the States. We were close knit, and yet we weren't. They were a hard-working bunch of guys that played hard at night. We go out and fly all day long, get shot at, sometimes shot down. I was shot down 5 times in my first tour. And you get back to base camp, you get something to eat, and pardon me for saying this, but we drank at night, we played poker until wee hours in the morning, got up the next morning and went out and did it all again.
The helicopter is kind of a slow-moving vehicle, so it's pretty easy to be a target, I guess.
A fully loaded B model at that point in time, with the density altitude as high as it was in Vietnam, which means the air at ground level is extremely thin. And when the air is thin, the rotor blades can't grab the air as well, and so your lift is not as great as if the density altitude was low.
Is that because of the heat?
Because of the heat and a lot of other factors. The speed on a fully loaded B model back then, we were lucky if we could do 90 knots.
So when you're flying above the enemy, you're fairly easy to hit. When you got shot down, tell us about that experience the first time, if you can remember the first time.
The first time, I was flying along, and all of a sudden my door gunner shouted out, "We're taking fire." And I could hear the pops coming up from the ground. I was a co-pilot at that point in time. I wasn't flying the aircraft. My aircraft commander was. His call sign was Sabre Red 28 at that point in time. And he immediately broke. Break means to turn away from the fire. And the door gunners and crew chief firing their M60s out the window, and a scout bird coming back around and returning fire with an M60 out of his helicopter. It was scary, especially since I wasn't in control. First time I took fire as an aircraft commander, you can only think of one thing, and that's getting your crew safely out of whatever situation you were in.
And when you got hit, how long did it take before you hit the ground? Just walk me through what those.
When you lose your engine, you're descending at 500 foot a minute. And if you're at 100 feet, you don't have a lot of time.
So what happens? Who comes to your aid at that point?
At that point in time, what we did is we flew 2 light fire teams. And circling between the 2 light fire teams were 2 lift helicopters, one of which had a squad of infantry on board. The other one was empty. And the empty helicopter's job was to come down and pull the crew out. And the infantry would be inserted to secure the aircraft if at all possible.
In other words, that they would land, get out of the helicopter, set up a perimeter to protect you.
Correct.
All right. So the enemy, as you know much better than I do, the enemy would shoot down one helicopter, anticipating that a second one or third one would come in, so that there wasn't one target, then there'd be 2 or 3 targets.
That's right.
Yeah. So you learned they learned how you operated, you learned how they operated at the time, didn't it?
That's correct.
Just tell me about being back at the base, or what did you call where you were when you went at night, when you at the end of your day? Was that the base?
That was the base camp. LZ Evans in 1968.
That's at Dong Ha, I believe, wasn't it?
It's southwest of Dong Ha.
Okay.
We took over an area that the 101st Airborne had been. They were at LZ Evans to begin with. And to be honest with you, I don't know what they called the LZ at that point in time. When the 1st Cav took it over, we called it LZ Evans. And the basic, I think you asked what the basic day looked like. The basic day at the base camp, you got an entire division. You've got some artillery batteries that are located on the base camp. You've got several strands of fencing, concertina wire, barbed wire. You have claymore mines that face outwards, obviously, to be set off if the enemy came. There were bunkers that were dug and sandbagged to thwart the enemy and to be able to fight the enemy from, and also to protect our troops if we got incoming rockets or mortars. Then you go to a bunker and you'd hide down there until you got the all clear sign.
When you were talking about playing cards and drinking and staying up late, did it get in your head at some point that well, I'm running out of time here, or I'm running out of, I don't know how many bullets I can dodge? In other words, sometimes when you're away from combat, that's when things kind of sink into you, that this is dangerous. If you're in the middle of a firefight, the adrenaline keeps you going. But when you get back and stop, did the danger of what you were doing get in your head when you weren't out there flying?
You could not fly scared. When you got back to base camp, that's part of what the alcohol late at night was for. But when you got back to base camp, you had to, as in some of the movies that have been made, The Right Stuff, you got to be cool. You got to go with the flow. And you don't even think about it. You ignore that aspect of what you do every day. You amuse yourself with playing games, playing card games, whatever. But you just shut that aside, because if you fly scared, you're going to get somebody killed.
What were the guys like that you served with? I know you said you didn't get close to them necessarily, but I guess sometimes you had to let your guard down.
Oh, sure. They were just guys. They were guys who were well trained. They knew their job. They knew what was expected of them. And they went out and did their job every day. And when they got back to base camp, just like the rest of us, we made the best of it we could. You know, talking, joking, gallows humor. Hey, if you don't come back, can I have your stereo? You know, that kind of stuff. You know, you just have to ignore the fact that there's death out there, and you're not going to be part of it. You know, I honestly, until my last mission in Vietnam on my second tour, I honestly didn't think anything would happen to me, because I convinced myself of it. You know, if you couldn't convince yourself of the fact that you were going to make it, you wouldn't.
You probably wouldn't have been there in the first place.
That's right.
Yeah. What were you hearing from back home at the time? You must have been aware that there was a lot of negativity in America about the war at the time. What were you hearing and what were you thinking?
It was very demoralizing, to be honest with you. When I came back from Vietnam, my first tour in 1968, I was told not to wear my uniform back to the States. And sure enough, it would have been a bad idea. I was never spit on or anything like that, but I was ostracized. I was accused of being baby killers. I remember one time while I was a flight instructor, and I went to a party one night, and there was some young ladies who were sitting around them, all college kids. It was a sorority party, and one of them started crying, and I asked her why she started crying. And she said, well, you seem so nice. I don't understand how you could kill women and children. our country was so naive at that point in time. And if you don't mind me saying, I joined the Army because I honestly thought we were going over there to fight democracy. I mean, fight communism, fight for democracy. I honestly thought the Vietnamese people wanted to be free of communism. What I found out is that the Vietnamese people, all they wanted was to be able to farm their rice paddies, go out, trade in the villages, and take care of their families. That's what they wanted. They didn't want us there. And whole aspect of Vietnam, for me, changed because I was no longer there to fight communism. I was there fighting some war that somebody told me I had to go do.
And at what point in your service in Vietnam did this occur? Is this in the first tour that you began to have these feelings?
It happened in my first tour when I realized it was all about money. If we blew up a Frenchman's rubber plantation, if we shot rockets into it, the U.S. government had to reimburse the Frenchmen for the trees that we destroyed. It was all about money, pure and simple.
Yeah. What did you see when you got back home? Was it a different country in terms of the way people looked at Vietnam when you got back at the end of your first tour?
No, they still felt that it was an unjust war. They felt that we had no business being there. They felt that those of us who served weren't real Americans. We were less than. We were, as I stated before, literally children and baby killers. They didn't realize that we were out trying to save our own lives. We were trying to stay alive. And, we're doing, I'm very patriotic. If somebody told me today that I had to go and fight a war someplace, I'd say, where do I sign? Because this is my country. And the powers to be, the people who run the country, a little bit smarter than me, know a little more of the reasons why we do things, and I do it.
I think one of the things that people don't often think about is that the people who served in Vietnam, from my point of view, more than any other thing, were there to help each other, to protect each other.
Exactly. The men on the ground, Band of Brothers, all the different movies that have been made about it, very real. I've got your back, you got mine. And it's a brotherhood. I hate to see some of the films that have been made about Vietnam because it overemphasizes the drug problem. Was there a drug problem? Yes, there was. There's, I have to say it. But as prevalent as what they make it out to be, absolutely not. The men were
drug problems in the culture. There's drug problems in the country.
Sure, absolutely. And in fact, they're worse today than they were back then. To be honest with you. But the guys, they just wanted to survive. They wanted to get their tour in and get back to the States, what we call get back to the world.
Did you see, for example, the Ken Burns series that was on PBS?
No, I didn't.
Yeah, it's worth seeing. It's worth seeing. It's very well done. There's a new one we were talking again before we started today. Netflix has a new series out about Vietnam. There's a new movie that's due to come out, I think, next year about the women that served primarily in healthcare, medical care in Vietnam. So the stories are still occasionally being told, but it just has always seemed to me like that there were stories that they didn't really want to tell, that they just wanted to. That was the hard part to me, to come back to, again, going back to something you said a few minutes ago, to be kind of ignored, to it just as if people just would rather not talk about Vietnam. Well, if we don't talk about it,
it didn't exist.
It didn't happen.
Yeah, so, exactly. Yeah. And what I'm afraid of, that if we forget about Vietnam, we forget about Korea, we forget about all the actions that we've been in, we're going to keep doing the same thing over and over and over again. Vietnam is a picture storybook of how not to fight a war, how to be in a war with absolutely no incentive to win it. We could have finished Vietnam, started in 65, we could have finished Vietnam by 71, easily, if we were allowed to fight the war, but the politicians wouldn't let us.
It would have been a price. It would have been a price to have to pay that we probably didn't want to pay. If you don't mind, and I know that you alluded to the draft, that you would have been, most likely would have been susceptible to being drafted. What part of Vietnam is the story of the draft? There's a huge inequity there because some people went and some people didn't, and we're in that situation still today. But talk to me about the draft and how that was in your life and in the lives of other people who went to Vietnam.
The draft was bitterly wrong, and yet it was right. You know, not everybody is cut out to fight a war. Not everybody has the ability inside to be able to take another person's life. It's not an easy thing to do. And those people who absolutely were against the war and everything else, they ran to Canada. I don't think the draft should have existed because it divided the country. It literally did. You had your draft dodgers, everybody talked about the draft dodgers. But they were doing what they felt innermost strongly about. I don't begrudge them one bit. A lot of my fellow veterans did. They had a lot of disdain for the draft dodgers. But, you know, that it's a personal choice. I joined the Army. I wanted to do my part for my country. Those people that felt it wasn't worth the price, by all means, that's their right. They have every right. I don't think the draft should have taken place.
We're in a situation now, we're not at this moment, but we have just basically finished the longest war in our history, the War on Terror, that lasted 20-something years.
Yes.
Vietnam in our time was the longest war, but we went through a long period of time in which there really wasn't a lot of conversation about it. Part of that, it seems to me, was that there are a lot of families in this country had no skin in the game because there's no draft, because there's no push to serve. But I'd like to hear your thoughts about, should we, as citizens of America, have to serve our country in some way or another when it comes to wartime or even peacetime?
Wow. That's a loaded question. I didn't expect to hear.
I don't mean to ask you loaded questions.
No. But it's a serious question. It's a question that needs answering. It needs answering because do I feel that young men of America should serve their time in the service? Yes, I do. It builds character. I don't want them going to war necessarily, but it builds character. It teaches a lot of lessons to young men that they're not getting nowadays. There are too many distractions in life that pull at different threads. Responsibility, it teaches responsibility. It teaches attention to detail. It teaches you how to really live your life. The military, as far as I'm concerned, is an excellent, in fact, my grandson is joining the Army. As a matter of fact, I think in 2 or 3 weeks he's going to be enlisting. So I think it's something that everybody should go through. Now, whether it's mandated or not, it certainly works for Israel. Mm-hmm. Israel's been doing that for years and years and years. Me personally, I think it would be a good idea. Whether the rest of the country does or not, that's the key.
Right. We have had a situation in the war in Iraq, war in Afghanistan, in which it seems to me that the war, for the most part, is fought by certain groups of people. certain classes of people. I hesitate to use the word classes, but I think it's true.
Ethnicity.
That there are people in certain socioeconomic levels in the country who don't serve, and they're not going to serve. And it seems to me that in Vietnam we had so much protest on the campus because everybody could potentially have had to go. But we've just been through a war on terror in which people didn't have to go. Either you joined, and in some cases, a lot of cases, for economic reasons or patriotic reasons. But there are lots and lots and lots of people who there was no pressure for them to make a decision. Therefore, no pressure to be for or against what we were doing. In other words, we conducted wars really without discussing whether they were right or wrong, or whether to continue to fight them was right or wrong, because so many people just simply didn't have it to go. I mean, I have 2 sons. My sons didn't have to go. That, to me, seems fundamentally wrong. If we have a war, then it should be something that something we discuss as a country, like you discuss a family problem around the dinner table. All right, we're going to go to war to fight terrorism. Then everybody's got to be in this game. That's the way it seems to me. But I'd like to hear your thoughts about that situation that we've just been through.
To me, the draft, if they were to bring back the draft, is not fair. I don't feel that I think that we, as a country, and we've demonstrated it so far, we have the strongest military in the world. We may be outnumbered by a lot of other military agencies, but we're sophisticated. We have lots of things to aid us in our war. And war is changing with the advent of artificial intelligence, with the advent of drones and everything else. I think the actual human element in war is going to be diminished to a large extent. So I just don't feel, and I hope this doesn't, well, if it does go against what you feel, that's okay too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But I don't think the draft should be re-implemented. I think we have enough volunteers, enough individuals that feel strongly about becoming military for economic reasons. You join the military, you have part of your education paid for. So there's a lot of reasons that can cause a person to decide to join, other than being drafted. I think that if the draft were brought back again, it'd simply divide the nation.
Yeah. I guess I'm conflicted about it too. I'm not quite sure. The one thing that I drag around about Vietnam all these years later is the unfairness of it. That if you, I have never understood, or will never understood to my dying day, how someone who is a college student, how their life is worth more than your life.
Yeah.
If you go to a trade school or if you work on a farm, it is just wrong. And I believed it then, I believe it now, that if we're going to have a war, then we fight a war. If we are America, we are in a war, then we're in it together. And I felt like in Vietnam that got away from us.
Oh,
and
absolutely.
it's still getting away from us.
You know, we fight wars for economic reasons. If you look at the pattern of warfare in modern times for U.S. history, it always is it comes after or during recessions. The country gets a lift financially out of going to war. The war machine gets put into motion. And is that right? Is that just? I don't think it is. I think we've been involved in conflicts overseas that should be decided by the country that the conflicts take place in. I mean, they're fighting brother against brother. It's like our Confederate War. You know, one side in that country decides they want it run one way, the other side wants it run another way. Let them solve their problem. I don't feel it's our responsibility.
Tell me about your second tour. Now, when did you went back basically a year after you came home in January of 69. Is that correct?
No, I went back in January of 71.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
I was a flight instructor at Fort Rucker from January of
Rucker,
69, Fort Rucker, Alabama, from January of 69 through December of 70. And I went back to Vietnam in 71 for a 10-month tour. The second tour, I was assigned to the 116th Assault Helicopter Company. We were OPCON to the Americal Division out of Chu Lai, and I flew in that area during that period of time. And that support was not the same as my first tour. We were in direct support of ground troops at all times. There was no search and destroy missions. We were called out for field operations to provide gun cover.
How was the war different? Is it possible to say that it was different a year later for you, or
2.5 years? Yeah, it was different. The war was winding down. Combat was not nearly as intense as it was in 1968. There were a lot more operations going on in 68 than in 71. The major operation that I attended in 1971 was the ARVN, the Army of Vietnam, inserting their troops into Laos up on the other side of Khe Sanh. And that was the major offensive that took place. Most of the days were just going out and giving gun cover to field support.
did you were you more cautious the second time around, or was that possible to be?
No, as a matter of fact, I found most of the units flew a little more recklessly because there wasn't as much ground contact as we had in 68. In 68, you had the Tet Offensive. It was followed up by Ashall Valley and Khe Sanh. Then the 1st Cav moved to, in August of 68, to Loc Ninh and down in the Saigon area, and we operated out of the Fish Hook and Firebase Delta and some other military operations out of Loc Ninh. And so the first tour was a lot more combat oriented than the second tour in 71. And in reflection, 72 started the wind down of pulling troops out of Vietnam and slowing operation. So it was not nearly as combat ready as 68.
And let's see, you came home, and I presume you got out because you wanted to at that point.
Well, I was offered to stay. I was on the 5% list of major at that point in time.
So you were a captain at this point.
I was a captain when I got out. CO and the colonel in Fort Lewis, Washington, which is where I was rotating out of the military, offered me a chance to stay in. And I asked him, I said, okay, I'm on the 5% list of major, which means that unless I messed up in some way, they had to promote me within the next 9 months. Then I asked him, I said, after if I stay in, what's my next duty station? And they said, well, you'll be going to Fort Sill, Oklahoma for officers career course in field artillery. And I said, okay, after that. And he said, well, you'll be scheduled for Vietnam again. And I said, wait a minute. I will have been in Vietnam 2 years, shot down 9 times, and you want me to go back for a third tour? I don't think so. And that's when I decided to get out.
What was it like when you walked out of the gate in civilian clothes for that last time?
1971, the attitude had changed a little bit. There was still unrest about Vietnam, but the country had pretty well recognized it was winding down. The politicians were getting things worked out across Europe and their different meetings. I forget exactly what those meetings were called. You probably recall better than I. But it was winding down, and it was just getting back to civilian life and starting a new life.
What was it like for you to be a Vietnam veteran at that time, in conversations with people?
We didn't talk about it. If somebody asked me what I did in the military, I said, well, I flew helicopters and I let it go. You didn't tell war stories. You didn't talk about how many times you were shot down because, quite frankly, the American public were tired of hearing about Vietnam. They wanted to just go away.
Were you able to adjust? Was there an adjustment for you? I mean, you've been in the military, which, Vietnam or not, is different than civilian life.
It was quite an adjustment. You become what's called an adrenaline junkie. I found myself late at night, 5, 6 years after I'd been back to the States, late at night, driving my car at 100 miles an hour, running stop signs and stoplights, just for the adrenaline surge, just for the excitement, to feel alive again. Because, quite frankly, civilian life was dull. You know, you miss the action, you miss the excitement, you miss the unknown every day. And it was tough. Consequently, I drank way too much, trying to forget, trying to shut down every night, to not think about. I don't know whether I should say this or not, but I was responsible for killing a lot of people in Vietnam. Mm-hmm. And a lot of those people didn't deserve to be killed, because rockets, they don't have targets. They have broad areas that they hit. Miniguns are all over the place. And I had nightmares about it. And I drank to shut down those nightmares and to just basically survive day after day.
Did you talk to other people who had been to Vietnam?
I remember talking to my brother-in-law. I wanted to explain to him what Vietnam was all about. And unfortunately, at that point in time, he just couldn't hear it. It was something that the public just didn't want to hear anything more of. And so I quit trying to talk about it. And in doing so, what happens is you have this tremendous amount of emotions and everything else that you bottle down, you stuff. You stuff your feelings. You stop feeling. And that hurts in relationships with people. I had 3 marriages during that period of time. I'd worked real hard to get somebody to like me, to love me. And then I would shut down because I couldn't talk. I couldn't let people know really what was going on inside me. So it was tough.
From what age to what age did you have this experience? How old were you when you got out? I guess you were 20. You were 20 when you went in.
Right.
Right.
1971, I was born in 46, I was 25.
Okay. So how long did it take to go through those 3 marriages and through all that experience? All those feelings?
About 56 years. I'm 78 today. Yeah. I started going through programs for PTSD. Mm-hmm. I'm 100% PTSD from the VA and also Social Security. I started receiving counseling from the VA as well as private doctors back in the early 80s, mm-hmm. when I realized I had a problem. And I've been in and out of counseling ever since. 2 years ago, I entered an incredible program down in Fayetteville, Arkansas, that we called it the RRTP, Residential Rehabilitation Training Program. And I just recently went through another program in in Memphis, Tennessee, another program that just outdid the first one I went through. And it's been terrific. It's really brought me to a point in life where I can sit back and say, I'm okay. What I went through is something that was horrible. It shouldn't have happened, but it did. But today I'm okay. Today I'm a good person. Today I can believe in myself like I couldn't do before. I didn't like me.
How did they get you there? What do they do that helps you get to that, the way you feel now?
A lot of introspection, a lot of understanding really what happens inside in your thinking, in your emotions. A lot of recognition that emotions are real. I mean, do they apply to what's going on inside you right now? Who knows? We do what we call the 3 C's. We catch an idea in our head. We check the idea for validity, having trouble with my tongue. Check the idea for validity, then correct it if it needs correcting. We go through also what we call mindfulness. And with mindfulness, we think about what's going on. We concentrate on the moment right now, not what's going to happen tomorrow, not what happened last year, but today, right now, right this minute. Right this minute, I feel very comfortable with you. And 2 years ago, I wouldn't have. Mm-hmm. I'd have been on edge. But today, I can be me.
And your wife, Cheryl, whom I met when you sat down today, you said she's the good one, she's the right one. How does she make a difference in your life? Because she's heard a lot of these stories, I assume.
Sure. Cheryl and the family she brings to me are my life. They are why I wake up in the morning. I'm currently writing a book about my first tour in Vietnam. I want to be able to leave a legacy for my family. I don't have any children of my own. I've never been blessed with that in my life. But Cheryl is my life, and the family that she brings with her are my life.
What you learned or what you got from the time that you served your country in Vietnam in a way, what would you say to people?
I learned lessons of life that few people ever have the opportunity to learn. I've had a life, I've been blessed with a life where I've done many things in my life. I've started environmental consulting firm for some people out of Newport Beach in California. I've been the keynote speaker to the National Asbestos Council. I've held positions that I've made decisions for people all around the country in different jobs that I've had in my life. And that's all because of the military. They taught me discipline. They taught me drive. They taught me the fact that you finish what you start. It taught me perseverance. It taught me resilience. I'm a pretty resilient person. I've come back from a lot in my life. I even attempted suicide twice. And I've come back from both of those situations. And every time I come back stronger. I come back more determined than ever to leave a mark somewhere that I can be proud of and that my family can be proud of.
What do you tell them? What do you tell them that people should know about the war, about your experience, about their country, about their responsibility? What do you tell people?
What I tell people is that, first off, the military was the greatest experience of my life, that it taught me so many things about life and how to bear a witness to life, how to conduct myself, how to carry myself in life. I would not have been able to accomplish anywhere near the number of things I have in my life had it not been for the military and the training that I got. What I would tell them is to be responsible to themselves. Whatever you do, whatever you decide to do with your life, whether it's join the military, whether it's to go back to college, whatever it is, do it to the best of your ability. Don't let a single day go by that you have regrets about yesterday. Live today for every moment you can and be productive. Put something back into the world because we all take from the world. We need to replace what we take. And we do that with hard work. We do that with perseverance. We do that with demonstrating who we are.
It seems to me that you've described the experiences you've had and you've described what you gained from being in the military, but it's almost an equal share with what you learned having to learn how to deal with what came with that time you spent in the military.
There's a price to be paid. There's no question about it. If you are in combat, you are going to bear a burden. There's no question about it. Vietnam soldiers, we came back and we were not respected, but the current soldiers of today have brought that respect back to the Vietnam soldiers. I am so proud of our men that serve today, because they have brought pride back to us.
And people, it's not just them. It's somehow people, I think part of it is what you went through, is people recognize that you were not acknowledged in the way that you should have been, the people that you served with, that generation you served with. I agree with you about those veterans today, and I think that's wonderful. But it helped. I think there was the parade in 1991 when they came back from the Desert Storm. And there was a parade down Broadway, and everybody says, well, what happened to the parade for the Vietnam veterans? The first time that question was ever asked.
Yeah.
Well, listen, David, thank you so much for being here today. It's been a really, really wonderful conversation. I really enjoyed it. And I hate to say it this way, but thank you for your service.
Thank you. It was my honor.
Okay. Thank you for being here today. Before we go today, I think anybody who's seen the show more than once has seen that from time to time I'll travel around different parts of the country and see the places in which Vietnam veterans and all veterans are acknowledged for their service and their sacrifice. And today I want to show you some pictures from Corsicana, Texas. We went there on a trip a couple of years ago, and we stopped by the courthouse and saw all the monuments and the names, but there was a statue to a guy named Candelaria Garcia. And I want to tell you a little bit about his story right now. In December of 1968, he fought in Vietnam and was heroic. There's no other way to describe what he did that day, but he was heroic. He lived in Texas until 2013, at which time he passed. Now, they say in Corsicana that his family didn't really know much about what he had done in Vietnam. Well, 1 year later, in 2014, he was awarded the Congressional Medal of Honor for his heroism. And there's a statue to him in that town. If you drive through that town in East Texas, stop and look at it. But if you go to any place in this country where they acknowledge the service of Vietnam veterans, look at them, look at the names, and look at the names carefully, because for every name on any statue or any monument, there is a family behind them. Okay? And we should remember that all the time. We should remember that every day. Again, my name is George Larrimore. This is Vietnam 360. Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate the Library Channel making this possible. We'll see you again.